No doubt you've discovered that loyalty is no longer the currency of the realm, as your father believes.
Then what is?
I'm afraid currency is the currency of the realm.
Across the Spanish Main. Part 5. The dawning of England's ambition for the Main. In the gilded chambers of Elizabethan England, where diplomacy often bore the sharp edge of national ambition, Sir William Cecil's words to the Spanish ambassador in 1566 rang less as a request and more as a declaration. He did not simply ask where Englishmen might trade freely on the Spanish Main. He announced England's intent to challenge Spanish dominance of the New World. To the ambassador, the message was clear. England would not stand idly by as Spain claimed the vast wealth of its empire as its own. For decades, English eyes had gleamed with envy at the gold, silver, and exotic goods flowing from Spanish colonies. The riches of the New World, spoken of in hushed, awestruck tones, had ignited a longing in the hearts of merchants and sailors alike. French and English freebooters, rogues, and adventurers had already tasted the fruits of plunder on the Spanish Main. Yet for England, a nation of maritime traders, profit was not merely about piracy. It was about trade and the promise of vast, untapped market. The hunger for commerce found an early voice in Richard Eden, a royal official whose 1553 publication, A Treatise of the New India, struck a chord with the merchant class. Eden painted a glowing picture of Spanish holdings in the Caribbean, calling them a realm of near-mythic abundance. He openly challenged Spain's audacious claim to be lords of half the world, and called on his fellow Englishmen to act before Spain's grip tightened irreversibly. "That rich treasury in Seville," he lamented, "might long since have been in the Tower of London." Eden's words were not idle musings, but a rallying cry for English merchants to take what they saw as their rightful place in the New World. Already there were tales of bold ventures that hinted at the immense profits to be made. In 1530, William Hawkins, a Plymouth captain of unmatched daring, crossed the Atlantic to Brazil. There he traded for prized dyewood, the vibrant hues of which dazzled English wool merchants and fetched a fortune back home. Yet the shadow of Spanish might loomed large. Carlos I of Spain had decreed the Caribbean off-limits to English merchants, and Spanish warships patrolled the seas to enforce this command. The mantle of defiance fell to William's son, John Hawkins, a man destined to redefine England's role on the Spanish Main. Born into a family of mariners, young John grew up surrounded by tales of distant coasts and glittering treasures. By the time his father passed, leaving the family shipping business to John and his brother, Hawkins had already begun to forge a reputation as a privateer in the English Channel. His early experiences hardened him, instilling the ambition, resourcefulness, and ruthlessness that would later define his exploits. Hawkins's voyages to the Spanish-controlled Canary Islands marked a turning point. A hub for galleons en route to Americas, the Canaries teemed with merchants who whispered of the wealth of the Spanish Main. Gold, silver, pearls, even the more prosaic goods of the New World, sugar, cacao, tobacco, and hides, commanded high prices. Hawkins listened intently, his mind turning over the possibilities. Spanish traders revealed to him a secret. While Spain's largest ports were heavily guarded, smaller settlements on the Spanish Main offered opportunities for the daring. Plantation owners, desperate for European goods but stifled by the exorbitant prices imposed by Spain's Casa de Contratación in Seville, were willing to deal discreetly. In exchange for manufactured goods, they would pay handsomely in silver, pearls, and other riches. Thus, Hawkins conceived his first trading voyage to the Spanish Main. He envisioned not piracy but profit, a bold yet peaceful venture into Spain's closely guarded domain. The young captain saw himself as a bit of a pioneer, going to break Spain's monopoly with ingenuity and commerce. He would sail into forbidden waters, armed not with cannons, but with wares that settlers could not resist. What Hawkins did not yet realize was how swiftly peaceful trade could transform into open conflict. The Spaniards, jealous of their monopoly and suspicious of the outsiders, would not welcome his intrusion, and Hawkins, confronted with resistance, would discover within himself the cunning and ferocity of a freebooter. The story of John Hawkins was just the beginning. The broader tale of England's rise on the Spanish Main was already in motion. The Spanish Empire, sprawling and wealthy, was a tempting target for a maritime nation like England. Hawkins's early adventures hinted at a future where trade, piracy, and warfare would blend into a chaotic struggle for dominance. This was not just a tale of a single man, but the opening chapter in an era of high seas conflict and empire building. England's ambition, stoked by men like Hawkins, Eden, and Cecil, would soon transform the Spanish Main into a battleground, where the fate of nations and the flow of untold riches would be decided. By the mid-16th century, the Spanish colonies in the New World were ravenous for labor, their sprawling plantations increasingly dependent on enslaved Africans. The demand far outstripped the supply allowed by Spain's Casa de Contracción, whose burdensome regulations and high taxes stifled the profitability of the trade. Smugglers, particularly Portuguese, filled the void, delivering thousands of slaves annually to the Spanish planters, who, often complicit themselves, turned a blind eye to the illegality of their purchases. For John Hawkins, this shadow economy represented an irresistible opportunity. In 1562, emboldened by tales of the Spanish Main's riches, Hawkins embarked on a voyage that would transform him from an ambitious merchant into a figure whose name would be etched into the annals of history and infamy. Hawkins's first slave trade expedition began modestly. With the backing of his father-in-law, Benjamin Gonson, he outfitted 3 small ships and set sail for the Guinea coast of West Africa. There he acquired a cargo of 300 slaves, as he later recounted, partly by the sword and partly by other means. The grim reality of Hawkins' venture involved raids, violent skirmishes, and dealings with local chieftains complicit in the transatlantic slave trade. The Atlantic crossing was uneventful, and Hawkins' fleet arrived at Hispaniola with its human cargo intact. The reaction of the Spanish settlers was telling. Though smuggling was forbidden, they eagerly purchased the enslaved Africans in exchange for silver, pearls, and other goods. Such was their desperation for labor that even a local official tasked with suppressing contraband granted Hawkins permission to trade. By the time Hawkins returned to England in September of 1564, his venture had yielded handsome profits. The Spanish Main, he realized, offered immense promise for those willing to navigate its dangers. Flush with success, he immediately began organizing a second expedition, one that would be grander, riskier, and ultimately more consequential. The news of Hawkins's success spread quickly, attracting the attention of merchants, noblemen, and even the crown. England's newly ascended Protestant queen, Queen Elizabeth I, saw Hawkins' enterprise as a way to undercut Catholic Spain while filling her treasury. After personally interviewing Hawkins, she lent him a royal ship, the Jesus of Lubeck, to serve as his flagship. This ship, a massive 700-ton vessel, had been purchased decades earlier by Henry VIII, and now, slow and aged, its timbers creaking with disrepair. Yet once refurbished, the Jesus was a formidable warship, with towering decks, stacked with cannon, an imposing symbol of England's rising ambitions. To accompany the Jesus, Hawkins prepared 3 additional ships, the Salomon, which had served him well on his first voyage, and 2 smaller family vessels, the Swallow and the Tiger. The fleet was stocked with provisions for 500 slaves and a variety of trade goods, including woolen cloth, linens, and trinkets meant to entice Spanish planters. By October 18, 1564, Hawkins's fleet was ready. With a crew of 150 men, he set out from Portsmouth Harbor, bound once more for the Guinea coast. His instructions to the crew were direct and simple. Serve God daily, love one another, preserve your victuals, beware of fire, and keep good company. The English ships arrived off the humid, sweltering shores of Guinea and began their grim work. Hawkins and his men traded with Portuguese slavers and African chieftains, exchanging goods for captives. Yet the trade was fraught with danger. In one ill-fated raid, Hawkins and his men were ambushed by 200 African warriors, barely escaping to their ships after losing 7 of their own. Through negotiation, force, and opportunism, Hawkins had amassed more than 400 slaves by late January 1565. His fleet, burdened with its human cargo, set sail for the Spanish Main. Hawkins's reputation as a bold trader preceded him as his fleet entered Spanish waters. The Spanish settlers were desperate for goods and labor, yet they feared the wrath of the authorities in Seville. Hawkins did have to tread carefully, navigating not only the perilous waters of the Caribbean, but also the shifting loyalties of Spanish officials, some of whom were plantation owners themselves. The months that followed would test Hawkins' mettle as a trader and a mariner. His journey would cement his reputation as a daring entrepreneur, but it would also foreshadow the tensions that would soon erupt into outright conflict.